podcast from the Outsider blog. If you don't know, my name is Ruby Ritchie. Joining me today is an esteemed member of the International Institute for Women, Rebecca Ingram. Before we dive into the interview, here's just some background information about our special guest. Rebecca Ingram specialises in how women are represented in literature, art, film and music. And today, specifically, I will be asking questions on how Shakespeare's Othello represents women. Additionally, I will also ask how Othello's representation of women links to society's propensity to marginalise and alienate the outsider. Hey Rebecca, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's good to hear. Now, first let's talk about context. Othello was set in Venice around the 16th to 17th century. How were women treated in that period?
Well, during this time, women were limited in their options, in that it was a patriarchal society. Women were to be used for bearing children and were often married very young. The legal age for girls was 12 and 14 for boys. Once born, a girl's life was dictated by her father, and once married, that power was inherited by her husband.
It's interesting that you said inherited. Could you elaborate further as to why you use that term?
The reason I've used the word inherited was because women were considered possessions in that period. Desdemona, Emilia and Bianca, Cassio's lover, were considered possessions by their fathers and husbands. In the introduction of the play, Iago even refers to Desdemona as a possession, saying to her father, "Awake, what ho, Brabantio, thieves, thieves, look to your house, your daughter, and your bags, thieves, thieves." What Iago is saying conveys how women were perceived as belongings, and further, so might Desdemona.
An interesting point. What part of Othello do you believe to be the most significant in its representation of women?
There are many scenes and quotes you could use to justify how women were represented. The one I believe to be the most evidential takes place in Act 4, Scene 3, when Emilia answers a question that Desdemona naively asks, being, "Do wives cheat on their husbands?" Emilia says yes, but states that it is because husbands can treat their wives unkindly. Emilia states, "Say that they slack their duties and pour out treasures into foreign laps, or else break out in peevish jealousies, throwing restraint upon us, or say they strike us, or scant our former, having in despite."
Why is this quote so evidential?
Well, here she shares insight in the way husbands treat their wives, but perhaps implies that Iago has treated her this way before. She later says, "Yet have we some revenge. Let husbands know their wives have sense like them. They see and smell, and have their palates both for sweet and sour, as husbands have." Ultimately, Shakespeare here is revealing the only power that a woman has over a man is to make him a cuckold. This was, yes, detrimental to her, but even more humiliating for her husband, as he could not control or satisfy her. If a woman was to dominate or humiliate a man with the only power she has, being seduction, she was considered evil. Othello later expresses this, saying, "But alas, to make me a fixed figure for the time of scorn, to point his slow, unmoving finger at," and frequently calls Desdemona a devil.
So, overall, how does this representation of women link to society's propensity to marginalise the outsider?
Well, Ruby, from this representation we can understand how society in that context marginalised women. We know that if a woman were to be promiscuous, she would be shunned, but a husband would also be marginalised due to his lack of control. We also can understand clearly that women were outsiders due to the context, as they had limited control in their lives. In the patriarchal society of that time, its tendency was to marginalise the people who were perceived to be the most submissive, being women.
Oh, look at the time. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for coming here and answering our questions. Okay, everyone, that is our podcast of the week. Tune in next week for more.